What drives a person to sabotage their neighbor in the dead of night, armed with nothing but a tube of superglue and a grudge? In the quiet suburban cul-de-sac of Willow Lane, where manicured lawns and friendly waves masked simmering tensions, Karen Whitaker's life unraveled in a single, reckless act. Her story is one of petty vengeance, shattered illusions, and a bitter reckoning that left a community questioning the fragility of trust. Karen was no stranger to conflict. At 42, she had cultivated a reputation in Willow Lane as the woman who noticed everything and forgave nothing. Her pristine two-story colonial, with its rose garden and white picket fence, was a testament to her need for control. But control, she learned, was a fragile thing. Across the street lived Javier Morales, a single father and landscaper whose vibrant marigolds and late-night guitar strumming grated on Karen's nerves. To her, Javier's unkempt hedges and boisterous laughter were an affront to the neighborhood's order. She'd left notes on his doorstep, complained at HOA meetings, and even called the city about his excessive yard decorations. Javier, with his easy smile and unshakable calm, brushed it off, which only fueled Karen's resentment. The tension had simmered for months, but it boiled over one humid July evening. Javier had hosted a small barbecue, his backyard alive with music and the chatter of friends. Karen, peering through her blinds, seethed as the laughter drifted across the street. She couldn't pinpoint why it stung so deeply. Perhaps it was the joy she felt excluded from, or the way Javier seemed to thrive while she felt trapped in her meticulously curated life. That night, as the neighborhood slept, Karen made a choice that would change everything. Under the cover of darkness, she crept across the street, a tube of superglue clutched in her trembling hand. Her heart pounded, not with guilt, but with a strange exhilaration. She'd show him. She'd make him feel the inconvenience she endured. Kneeling by Javier's front door, she squeezed the glue into the lock, her breath shallow as the viscous liquid sealed the mechanism. She slipped back to her house, convinced she'd won a small victory. But Willow Lane was not as asleep as she thought. Unbeknownst to Karen, Javier's teenage daughter, Sophia, had installed a small security camera above their porch after a string of package thefts in the neighborhood. The grainy footage captured everything. Karen's furtive glance, the glint of the glue tube, the deliberate act. By morning, when Javier discovered he couldn't open his door, Sophia checked the camera. The evidence was undeniable. Javier, more hurt than angry, called the police. The fallout was swift. Officers arrived at Karen's door, their expressions a mix of disbelief and disappointment. She denied it at first, her voice sharp and indignant, but the video left no room for lies. As they led her away in handcuffs, neighbors watched from their windows, their whispers a chorus of shock and judgment. Karen, the woman who'd once lectured them on mailbox uniformity, was now the neighborhood pariah. In court, the truth unraveled further. Karen's lawyer argued it was a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment born of stress. But the prosecutor painted a different picture. A woman consumed by spite, targeting a man whose only crime was living his life. The judge, unmoved by Karen's tearful apologies, sentenced her to 3 months in county jail for vandalism and harassment. As the gavel fell, Karen felt the weight of her actions settle into her bones. She'd wanted control, but now she had none. Jail was a stark contrast to Willow Lane's manicured perfection. The fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly, and the air smelled of bleach and despair. Karen shared a cell with Lila, a wiry woman with a sharp tongue and a story that shifted the ground beneath Karen's feet. Lila, it turned out, had grown up in a neighborhood not unlike Willow Lane, but on the other side of privilege. She'd been evicted from her home at 17 after her mother's landlord disputes spiraled out of control. "People like you," Lila said one night, her voice low and cutting, "think you're above everyone else, but you're just one bad choice from being me." Lila's words haunted Karen. She'd always seen herself as the victim of Javier's noise, of the neighborhood's chaos, of a world that refused to bend to her rules. But Lila's story forced her to confront the ugliness of her actions. She hadn't just glued a lock. She tried to lock Javier out of the life he'd built, a life that included a daughter who adored him and a community that respected him. For the first time, Karen felt shame, not for being caught, but for what she'd become. The twist came on the eve of her release. A letter arrived, slipped under her cell door by a guard. It was from Sophia, Javier's daughter. Karen's hands shook as she opened it, expecting vitriol. Instead, she found a single page written in careful, looping script. Sophia wrote of her father's struggles, how he'd fled violence in his home country, worked grueling hours to provide for her, and found solace in his garden and music. She wrote of the pain Karen's act had caused, not just the inconvenience, but the betrayal of trust in a place they both called home. Yet, in a gesture that broke Karen's heart, Sophia ended the letter with forgiveness. "I hope you find peace," she wrote, "because holding on to anger only hurts you." Karen wept that night, clutching the letter like a lifeline. Sophia's grace was a mirror, reflecting the pettiness she'd let define her. She'd spent years guarding her perfect world, only to realize it was built on resentment rather than joy. When she was released, she returned to Willow Lane, but it was no longer home. Neighbors avoided her gaze, and Javier's marigolds seemed to bloom brighter, a silent rebuke. She wanted to apologize, to make amends, but the words felt hollow against the damage she'd done. In a final act of desperation, Karen decided to move. She sold her house, the rose garden she'd once tended with pride, now just a reminder of her fall. On her last day, she stood on her porch, watching Javier teach Sophia how to prune the marigolds. For a moment, she imagined crossing the street, confessing her regrets, and asking for a chance to start over. But she didn't. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. As she drove away from Willow Lane, Karen felt the weight of Sophia's letter in her pocket. It was a reminder of the humanity she'd ignored, the connections she'd severed in her pursuit of control. She'd glued a lock shut, but in doing so, she'd locked herself out of the life she could have had, a life of community, of forgiveness, of second chances. The road stretched ahead, empty and uncertain, and Karen knew she'd carry that bitterness with her, a wound that would never fully heal. Nd.